In the heart of a Huntington town, surrounded by rolling hills and winding streams, I grew up far from the flashy life of the city. Our small, worn-out house had creaky wooden floors and windows that looked out onto wide fields. It felt like a world all its own. It was here, with the simple warmth of family love, that my story began. My parents weren't rich in money, but they were rich in kindness and wisdom. My father, a local carpenter, had rough hands from years of work, but a gentle touch. He not only built furniture, but also taught me the values of hard work and humility. My mother, a schoolteacher, filled our home with books and stories, sparking my imagination and nurturing my dreams. Life in our small town was slow and simple. Neighbors greeted each other warmly, and community events were the highlights of our social calendar. I cherished this life, finding joy in the small pleasures, the fresh scent of earth after rain, the rustling of leaves underfoot, and the chorus of birds at dawn. It was at the local library where I first met James. He was different from anyone I had known. A visitor from the city, he had an air of sophistication but was unassuming. His family was well known in business circles, their wealth and influence extending far beyond the city's skyscrapers. But James, with his easy smile and genuine interest in my everyday tales, was a refreshing surprise in that world. Our initial conversations were cautious, like two worlds carefully getting to know each other. He talked about city life, the fast pace, endless opportunities, and dazzling lights. I shared stories of my town, the annual harvest festival, peaceful walks by the stream, and our close-knit community. In those early days, we often met at an old park bench by the lake, where we would talk for hours. The lake, with its calm waters reflecting the changing colors of the sky, witnessed our growing connection, weaving our different worlds into one. "Laura," James said to me one evening, his voice tinged with a vulnerability I had not seen before. "I have always been surrounded by people who care more about wealth and status. But with you, I found a peace I didn't know existed. You've shown me a different way of life, one that's real and full of warmth." His words stirred something deep inside me. James, where we come from doesn't define us. It's who we are when we're together that matters. You've given me a new view on life, opening my eyes to dreams I never dared to have. As our relationship grew, James told me about his family, especially his mother. She was elegant but had very high expectations. He spoke of her with respect, but also with concern. "She has her own ideas about who I should be with. I'm just worried about how she'll react to us." I reached out, taking his hand and feeling a slight tremble. "We'll face that together," I assured him. Love isn't about backgrounds or expectations. It's about two people who choose each other against all odds. The day James proposed was simple, just like our love. No grand gestures, just a heartfelt promise of a life together. As I looked into his eyes, full of hope and love, I knew this was just the beginning. The evening I was set to meet James's family, I was very nervous. Their grand mansion loomed large as we approached, a reminder of the different worlds James and I came from. James held my hand, giving me a reassuring look. "Just be yourself, Laura. That's all you need to be." I smiled weakly, trying to calm my nerves. "I just hope your mom doesn't think I'm out of place." James sighed, a hint of concern in his eyes. "Mom can be a bit much. Just remember, I'm here with you." As we entered the fancy dining room, James's mother, Shirley, a tall woman with a stern look, greeted us. Her eyes quickly scanned me, a flicker of disapproval crossing her face. "So this is the young lady who has captured my son's heart. Interesting choice, James." Dinner was elaborate, with dishes I couldn't even name. James's mother, ever the gracious host, offered me a plate with a sly smile. "I suppose these dishes might be a bit too sophisticated for your taste, Laura. We can get something simpler if you'd prefer." I felt embarrassed but managed a polite decline. "No thank you, I'm always eager to try new things." As the evening went on, her comments became more pointed. She eyed my dress, a simple but neat outfit, and continued to make subtle remarks. I had thought it was appropriate. Is that what passes for evening wear in your town? It must be challenging to find good clothes on a modest budget. James tried to change the subject, but his mother was relentless. Tell me, Laura, what do your parents do? It's always fascinating to learn about different walks of life. I answered, feeling her judgment. My father is a carpenter and my mother is a school teacher. Oh, how quaint, she replied, her voice dripping with condescendence. Hardworking people, I'm sure, but I suppose they couldn't offer you much in the way of a financial head start. The meal continued with her taking jabs at my small-town upbringing, my parents' humble jobs, and even my salary, which she somehow knew about. Each comment was polite but sharp enough to hurt. James was visibly uncomfortable, and his attempts to defend me only seemed to amuse her more. As we left, James's father, Richard, pulled me aside and offered a kind smile. Laura, you handled yourself well. Don't let her get to you, she'll come around. In the car, James apologized profusely. I'm so sorry, Laura. I didn't think she'd be this harsh. I sighed, feeling a mix of hurt and determination. It's okay, James. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I love you, and that's what matters. That night, as I lay in bed, the sting of his mother's words lingered. But beneath the hurt, a resolve was building. This was more than just about fitting in, it was a test of our love and my strength, and I was ready to face it head-on. As the wedding day approached, the air was thick with excitement and growing tension. Shirley, who had taken it upon herself to oversee the preparations, seemed to find pleasure in belittling my ideas and choices at every turn. One afternoon, while discussing the wedding plans with James and his mother, the topic of the wedding dress came up. I had chosen a simple yet elegant gown that I felt reflected my personality. James's mother, however, had other ideas. That dress, Laura, it's so plain. Don't you want to make a statement on your big day? After all, you're marrying into the family, she said, her voice laced with a patronizing tone. James squeezed my hand under the table, giving me a supportive look. Mom, Laura looks beautiful in that dress. It's her choice, and it's perfect. But his mother was relentless. Oh, James, let's be realistic. This is a high-profile event. People expect a certain standard. Laura, dear, you should consider something more fitting of our family's status. I tried to keep my voice steady, though her words stung. I appreciate your concern, but I really love my dress. It's special to me. She waved her hand dismissively. Well, it's your day, I suppose, but remember, it's not just about you. It's about how you represent us, too. As the days went by, her comments became more frequent and hurtful. Marian criticized the flower arrangements, the menu choices, and even the invitations. Each remark was a subtle dig at my background and my inability to meet her high standards. James and I often talked about this late into the night. I can't believe she's being so difficult, James would say, frustration clear in his voice. I wish she could just see how amazing you are and how happy you make me. I would lie there in his arms, feeling a mix of love and sorrow. I knew it wouldn't be easy marrying into your family, but I didn't expect it to be this hard. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. My parents and I had worked hard to make everything perfect despite Marian's constant criticisms. As I dressed in my simple but elegant gown, I hoped the day would pass without incident. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with love and heartfelt vows. James's eyes shone with affection and promise as we said our I do's. However, looming over the joyous occasion was the apprehension of the reception to follow, especially the speeches. As expected, Marian took the microphone, commanding the room's attention. The air was thick with expectation as she began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, she started, her voice loud and clear. Today we have gathered to witness the union of my son James with Laura, a person from a different circle. Whispers spread through the guests, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She continued, her words sharp and unyielding. While some may commend James for his charitable heart in lifting a beggar from the streets, we must be cautious. It's essential to keep our family's reputation and standards high, not let them be diluted by those who are clearly freeloaders seeking to elevate their status by clinging to a family of higher standing. The room fell into a stunned silence. My parents looked at me, their faces a mix of shock and hurt. James's face was a mask of disbelief and anger. The guests, a mix of our friends and James's high society acquaintances, looked on uncomfortably, unsure of how to react. My heart sank, and a deep shame washed over me. Her words were not just insults, they were meant to belittle and humiliate me in front of everyone we cared about. As she finished her speech with a forced toast to our future, the applause was hesitant and quiet. The room was wrapped in an awkward silence, the joy of the occasion spoiled by her venomous words. James stood up, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Laura. This isn't what I wanted." His eyes were filled with love and sorrow. I looked around at the shocked faces of our guests, feeling incredibly humiliated. Her words cast a heavy shadow over what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. The tension lingered after James's mother's harsh speech. Then his grandmother, Mrs. Joyce, a respected and authoritative figure in the family, requested the microphone. Her composed demeanor and serious expression immediately drew everyone's attention. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and firm. "I have something important to say. Laura, you have faced unfair criticism today, criticism that no one deserves, especially not on their wedding day." I looked up in surprise, and James beside me seemed equally astonished. Mrs. Joyce then turned to Shirley. "It seems we have forgotten our own past and where we come from. Let me remind everyone here, especially you, that before you were the lady of this house, you were a maid working under this very roof. It was here that you met your husband." A hush fell over the room. James's mother's face turned pale, her eyes widening in shock and embarrassment. Mrs. Joyce continued, her tone firm. "So, for a former maid to stand here and scorn someone for their humble beginnings is not only ironic but deeply hypocritical." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The room was silent, every guest hanging on to Mrs. Joyce's every word. You, who rose from poverty, should be the last person to judge or belittle another based on their background. We should be proud of Laura's integrity and strength, not deride her for it. The guests shifted uncomfortably, and whispers began to circulate. Shirley sat motionless, the impact of Mrs. Joyce's words clear on her face. In this family, we value character over wealth, kindness over status. Laura exemplifies these values, and I am proud to welcome her into our family, Mrs. Joyce concluded, her gaze softening as she looked at me. The room erupted into applause, a stark contrast to the earlier muted response. Shirley sat there, completely humbled, her earlier arrogance replaced by a visible sense of shame. "I didn't feel sorry for her," James whispered to me. "I never expected Grandma to stand up for us like this." I squeezed his hand, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. "She's amazing." The rest of the evening felt lighter, the air cleared by Mrs. Joyce's honest defense. Guests approached with warm congratulations and sincere smiles. I felt like they were all on my side, and it felt great. As we left the reception hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of confidence and belonging. Mrs. Joyce's words had changed everything, breaking the cruel plans of a not-so-smart woman. The days after the wedding were filled with unspoken tension in James's family. It all came to a head during a family meeting at Mrs. Joyce's house, where the air was thick with expectation and apprehension. As we gathered in the grand living room, Mrs. Joyce began without hesitation, her voice firm and unwavering. "What happened at the wedding cannot be overlooked. The way you spoke to Laura was disgraceful." She addressed Shirley directly, her eyes sharp. James's mother, usually so composed, looked smaller somehow, her usual confidence diminished. "Joyce, I've already apologized to Laura," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of defiance. It's not just about an apology, Mrs. Joyce retorted. Your actions reflect on this entire family. You've become accustomed to a lifestyle funded by the family's money without appreciating its value. James's father nodded in agreement, his expression serious. My mother is right. You've lost sight of what's important. Mrs. Joyce then laid out her decision, each word deliberate and clear. I've decided to cut off the financial support you've been receiving. It's time you start contributing to this family instead of just taking. You'll need to find a job and learn to live within your means. The shock on Shirley's face was evident. She turned to her husband, seeking support. You can't agree with this. She can't just cut me off like this. But Richard surprised her. I stand with my mother on this. You've gone too far this time. It's for your own good. Shirley's eyes filled with anger and disbelief, her usual poise crumbling under the weight of her new reality. James, who had been silent, spoke up, his voice steady. Mom, Grandma's decision is harsh, but it's fair. You need to understand the impact of your words and actions. I sat there watching the scene unfold, feeling a mix of sympathy and relief. James squeezed my hand under the table, silently supporting me. The meeting ended with James's mother in a state of shock, slowly realizing her situation. She was clearly used to living off her family, and the thought of working gave her a headache. I could barely contain a chuckle. As we left, James leaned in close. I never thought I'd see the day when Mom would be at a loss for words, but maybe this is what she needs to change. I nodded, feeling a cautious hope for the future. Perhaps this will be a new beginning for her, for all of us. The family reckoning had been tough but necessary. It was a pivotal moment that promised to reshape the dynamics within James's family, hopefully for the better. The honeymoon was a welcome escape for James and me. As we walked along the sunrise beaches, the soothing sound of the waves provided much-needed relief from the recent family turmoil. One evening, as we watched the sunset, James wrapped his arm around me. I'm sorry our wedding turned into such a drama, Laura. I wish things had been different. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. It's okay, James. It wasn't your fault. What matters is we're together now, away from all that stress. James sighed, looking out over the ocean. Yeah, but when we go back, we'll have to face the reality of my mom's situation. It's going to be tough for her. I nodded, understanding his concern. Maybe this will be a chance for her to grow, to see things from a different perspective. We spent our days exploring and our nights talking about our future. The challenges we had faced seemed to strengthen our bond, reaffirming our love for each other. On our last night, as we packed our bags, James looked thoughtful. You know, Laura, everything that happened made me realize how important you are to me. I can't imagine going through life with anyone else. I smiled, touched by his words. I feel the same, James. We've been through a lot, but it's only made our relationship stronger. We can handle whatever comes our way as long as we're together. As we headed back home, I felt ready to face whatever the future held, knowing we had each other. I felt a sense of peace. The honeymoon had not only been a break from the chaos, but also a time for us to strengthen our bond and prepare for the new chapter in our lives. We were returning to a changed reality, but we were doing it together, stronger and more united than ever. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with James by my side. Coming back from our honeymoon, James and I were unsure of what awaited us at his family home. The car ride was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts about the new family dynamics. As we arrived, the first thing we noticed was the absence of James's mother. Inside, we were greeted by his grandmother, Mrs. Joyce, who wore a knowing smile. Welcome back, you two. I suppose you're wondering about the changes here, she said, her tone light but with an undercurrent of seriousness. Yes, where's Mom? James asked, looking around. Mrs. Joyce took a deep breath, her smile still in place. Well, after you left, Shirley caused quite a scene. demanding that I restore her financial support. When I refused, she decided to leave. She's now living in a small apartment and, from what I hear, is looking for a job. James and I exchanged glances, the news sinking in. It was a drastic change from the luxurious life she was used to. And there's more, Mrs. Joyce continued, leaning in as if to share a secret. Your father is considering a divorce. He's had enough of her antics. It seems like she finally pushed him too far. Well, she brought it upon herself, James said, his expression a mix of shock and relief. I can't believe it. I knew things would change, but this is more than I expected. I reached out, touching his arm. It's a lot to take in, but maybe this is for the best a chance for everyone to start fresh on a more honest footing. Dinner that night was oddly serene. The absence of James's mother was felt, but not in the way we had anticipated. The conversation was more open, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like there was a real sense of family. As we drove home later that evening, James was pensive. I always hoped for a change, but I didn't expect it to happen like this. It's going to be a big adjustment for Mom, James said, breaking the silence. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It's a tough situation, but maybe it's a necessary step for her to grow, and for your dad too, to find some peace. Sometimes, change is needed for people to truly see what matters. The ride home was reflective, the quiet only broken by the hum of the car engine. We both sat lost in our thoughts, contemplating the new reality we were returning to. The family we left before the honeymoon was not the same one we were coming back to. It was a sobering thought, but also, in many ways, a hopeful one. As we drove through the familiar streets, I thought about how much had changed in such a short time. James's mother, who had always been a looming figure of control and criticism, was now facing a reality without the financial cushion she had relied on for so long. It was a dramatic shift, but one that might lead to her personal growth. Perhaps, without the comfort of easy money, she would learn to appreciate the smaller things in life and understand the value of hard work and humility. James's father, on the other hand, seemed ready to break free from the toxic dynamics that had ruled their marriage. His decision to consider a divorce was shocking, but it also held the promise of peace and a fresh start. For years, he had been caught in the crossfire of his wife's demands and expectations. Now, he had the chance to find happiness on his terms, without the constant strain of living up to someone else's standards. The family we were returning to was not the same, and that realization brought a mix of emotions. There was sadness for the pain and upheaval, but also a glimmer of hope for a better future. Change, though painful at times, was often the path to something better, and we were ready to face it together. As we pulled into our driveway, James turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and love. No matter what happens, we'll face it together. This is our chance to build something new, something stronger. I smiled, feeling a renewed sense of confidence. Yes, we will. We've already been through so much, and it's only made us stronger. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it. We stepped out of the car, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held. The path ahead might be uncertain and challenging, but with James by my side, I felt ready for anything. Together, we would navigate this new chapter, embracing the changes and growing stronger with each step. Mom, what's that over there? My daughter asked as we returned home from my parents' house. We were met with piles of trash bags in front of our entrance. As we got closer, I realized these bags contained our belongings, thrown together carelessly like trash. Confused, I exclaimed, "What's this? Why is this happening?" My daughter tearfully pulled out her beloved stuffed animal from one of the bags and hugged it tightly. Frustrated, I marched towards the entrance, only to find the locks had been changed while we were out. It was clear my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were behind this. Ringing the doorbell and knocking several times brought no response. "What is this? Isn't it terrible?" I muttered. Upon closer inspection, one of the trash bags had a note that read, "Parasites disappear, never come back." Anger surged within me, and I couldn't help but express my frustration aloud. The real parasites are you. This was the worst treatment I had ever received from my in-laws in 17 years. It was unbearable that they were making my daughter feel this way too. My patience exhausted, boiling with anger, I loaded our belongings into the car, and we returned to my parents' house. "I will never come back to this house again," I declared. "I'm looking forward to seeing what happens to the parasites when their host is gone." My name is Olivia. I am currently 45 years old. I live with my husband, daughter, and my husband's mother and sister. I can't say we live happily. I work from home, but this house is never peaceful. The issue lies with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Hannah. They have disliked and ignored me for over 12 years. As my daughter Megan grew up, it bothered me less and less. I mainly work as a personal consultant. I started as a fortune teller, but as my blog became popular, I began getting more questions about attracting customers. This led to my current job. I met my husband Jake through a friend's introduction when I was training to be a fortune teller. I work in sales at a pharmaceutical company and also do affiliate marketing as a side job, which is finally starting to take off. Jake gave me great advice on attracting customers when I struggled with fortune telling. Attracted by his kindness, we started dating and got married a year later. Our income wasn't great at that time, but Jake always supported me. I'm so glad I married Jake. I truly felt this way. Living with my in-laws started about a year after we got married. It began when my father-in-law, who had been healthy, suddenly passed away. My mother-in-law felt insecure about the future and asked my husband to live with us. We agreed to live together in exchange for her taking care of the household chores. At first, my mother-in-law welcomed us and was happy. I hoped we would get along well, but I was wrong. 4 months later, she began completely ignoring me, maybe because she was unhappy that I wasn't helping with the housework. Soon, my sister-in-law Hannah also started ignoring me. I didn't mind being ignored, but my mother-in-law's tendency to involve others was challenging. Not only did Hannah hear about it, but even neighbors and relatives were informed that my daughter-in-law stays at home but says she's working, leaving all the housework to me. If I stayed even a little, she would talk back 100-fold, so I just ignored her. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law would suggest to others, "You better not talk to her too, it'll be troublesome." As a result, people around the in-law house began giving me only cold responses to my greetings. I felt isolated, and it became very difficult. Despite my pleas to stop spreading strange rumors, my words were completely ignored. Although my mother-in-law's attitude softened slightly when my daughter Megan was born 3 years after we started living together, her overall stance towards me hardly changed. However, she was very fond of Megan, and having her help with household chores and childcare was a huge relief as my work became busier. Around the same time, my husband Jake's side business started to struggle, and he seemed unable to adapt to changes in the affiliate marketing market. He approached me saying, "Olivia, can you increase your contribution to the monthly expenses a bit?" I agreed and mentioned that my consultations were increasing and my new methods were working well. Even though I was willing to help boost his sales, Jake insisted on handling it alone, saying, "I think I'll try it on my own. I'm really sorry." From the start of our marriage, we agreed that Jake would manage the household finances. At first, my income was low, so he allowed me to contribute more when my sales increased. I would transfer money to Jake based on my monthly earnings, and he would give me a fixed amount for living expenses in cash. Initially, I could only contribute $300, but now I could transfer up to $3,000, though not every month. I could contribute more if I dipped into savings. I knew Jake was struggling with his side business, but his pride kept him from asking for my help. He started spending more time at caves after work, coming home later and later. When Megan was about 5, Hannah got married and moved out. Since she lived nearby, she often brought her son Frank to our house during the day. When Frank turned 1, Hannah said she wanted to start a part-time job, and my mother-in-law happily offered to take care of him until the evening. Hannah was grateful, saying, "Thank you, I'm so happy." As my mother-in-law started caring for Frank at home, she became very fond of him and began being cold towards Megan. When they fought, my mother-in-law would scold Megan and compare her unfavorably to Frank. Over time, Megan started playing near me and began to dislike my mother-in-law's behavior. I spoke up, saying, "Talk to your mother. Megan and Frank are both her grandchildren. She should treat them the same." Megan is already a big sister in elementary school. However, my mother-in-law's focus shifted, and she approached me, saying, "Things are tough at the company right now. We might not get bonuses, so could you contribute a bit more?" Despite the challenges, my blog's client attraction was successful, and I started receiving more consultations as a consultant, earning far more than I did as a fortune teller. When Jake asked for additional financial support, I responded, "I'm already contributing $4,000 a month. Isn't that enough?" "Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say, but my salary has decreased, and the side business isn't going well." "Don't be secretive," I said. "We are a couple. We should support each other in tough times." "I'm really ashamed. Thank you." Later, the amount I contributed gradually increased, and eventually, I was transferring $5,000 a month to Jake. Still, not wanting to hurt his pride, I let Jake continue to manage the finances. When Megan was in 7th grade, Hannah came back home with Frank. It seems Hannah got divorced due to her infidelity, but I don't know the details. By this time, Megan could help around the house, so household chores were divided among each family member. Being ignored by my mother-in-law and Hannah continued, but it no longer bothered me. It's unfortunate that I couldn't give Megan her own room when she started middle school, as Hannah's return meant we ran out of rooms. One night, while discussing which tutoring school Megan should attend for middle school, Hannah suddenly said, "Hey, tutoring is expensive. Why doesn't Megan study by herself? Could you stop making such comments? I'm paying for the tutoring, so it's none of your business." "What? Olivia is paying? Impossible. You don't earn anything. Jake said he's supporting you. You're just a leech, aren't you? Haha, you married him because he has money, right?" "Exactly. Jake told me not to speak ill of Olivia, but that's just shameless." My mind was filled with questions. What does this mean? What has Jake been telling his mother and the others? Jake is the one supporting this house financially? It's about time we put an end to the parasite's lifestyle. I feel bad for Megan, but if we pay for her tutoring, we won't be able to pay my compensation. Not be able to pay? Are you saying our house is paying for your compensation, Hannah? Jake said he would pay for it. You should spend your money on Frank. I began to understand the deception and felt my anger rising. My husband had always managed our household finances, and my mother-in-law had taken care of the household chores and childcare until Megan grew up, so I thought they knew I was also contributing to the household expenses. Is Jake bearing all the expenses of this house, including your living expenses and the compensation Hannah is supposed to pay? Be quiet. It's only natural for a family. You're the only outsider here, not related by blood, and yet you act as if living here is your right. It really makes me angry. I contribute money too. Don't talk back. What you contribute is barely enough for your own food expenses. You hardly have any income, and yet you're so arrogant. I could feel my body trembling with anger. I could see Megan on the side, looking like she might cry. I knew Jake had a lot of pride, but I never thought it would be this bad. In the beginning, Jake was paying for the living expenses and pocket money for my mother-in-law and Hannah, but I had started contributing as well. Now we were living on my income. I needed to talk to Jake properly. Around midnight, Jake came home. He was drunk and seemed cheerful. Can we talk? I didn't know you weren't getting any money from your mother or Hannah. They said you're covering all the expenses of this house. Oh, about that. My bad. It's a matter of pride as a man, you know. When we started living together, I was paying for everything. There wasn't a right moment to say you were also paying, and in front of the family, let me be the eldest son a little, please. Jake, with a light-hearted tone like in a comedy sketch, put his hands together. Oh, that's right. I'm going to Faye this Saturday. I'll be gone for a week. Take care. Faye? Why? I got invited to a pedal in Faye by a friend I'm doing a side business with. I'm going to make it a success, so cheer for me, Olivia. Well, I'm off to sleep. See you tomorrow. My husband lay down on the mat in a cheerful mood and soon started snoring. My anger wouldn't subside, but recently, with Jake coming home late, we hadn't talked much and I had no idea about this. I thought he was joking while drunk, but on the weekend, Jake really left with a large suitcase. During Jake's absence, I had the freedom to use the car, so I decided to take Megan back to my parents' house. The next day, a shocking event awaited us. Mom, what is that? When Megan and I returned from my parents' house, there were piles of trash bags in front of the entrance. Upon closer inspection, these bags contained mine and Megan's belongings, carelessly packed like real trash. What is this? Why is this happening? I don't understand. Megan, crying, pulled out her beloved stuffed animal from the bag and hugged it. Furious, I headed towards the entrance. Has the lock changed? It seemed that the locks had been changed while we were out. This must be the work of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law Hannah. I rang the doorbell and knocked several times, but no one came out. What is this? Isn't it terrible? Upon closer inspection, one of the trash bags had a note saying, "Parasites disappear, never come back." I felt a surge of anger from the bottom of my heart. The real parasites are you. I couldn't help but let out a swear word. This was the worst treatment I had ever received from my in-laws in 17 years. They weren't just hurting me, but also making my daughter feel this way. I finally lost my patience. Boiling with anger, I loaded the luggage into the car, and we returned to my parents' house. I will never come back to this house again. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens to the parasites when their host is gone. When we returned to my parents' house, they were shocked. I hadn't told them about being ignored by my in-laws, the money issues, or their attitude towards Megan, not wanting to worry them. My parents said, "There's no need to go back to that house. You should claim compensation from them." They cried with anger and told me to stay with them. My mother's words, "You really had it tough," made me cry too. In reality, I had been trying my best all this time. Enough is enough. I finally decided to confront my feelings. While staying at my parents' house, I contacted a friend who had introduced me to Jake. She was connected to Jake's side business friends. "Are you doing well? I want to ask you something. Do you know if Jake's friends are currently in Faye?" That famous entrepreneur Petal, right? I was invited but wasn't interested, so I declined. Jake didn't go, did he? Yeah, that's right. By the way, I heard Jake quit his job and is now managing a business with his wife. You two must be close. Ah, yes, that's right, I replied nonchalantly and hung up. Immediately after, I called Jake's company. What my friend said was true, and to my surprise, Jake had quit his job 3 years ago. This meant that for the past 3 years, I had been paying almost all of the living expenses for my in-laws. Looking back over the years, I suddenly felt hollow. A week later, I received a laid-back message from Jake saying he was back in the USA. After continuously ignoring him, I stopped hearing from him altogether. He must have heard the news back home. Expecting persistent contact from Jake, I hired a detective to investigate him. The investigation revealed that Jake, dressed in a suit in the morning, spent his afternoons gambling and evenings at a woman's house. So I asked for an investigation into his infidelity as well. 2 weeks later, Jake called me. It must have been close to his former company's payday, and he was panicking. Olivia, sorry. I couldn't contact you. I'm sorry for what my family did. I heard they kicked you out, and I was thinking, why did it come to this? Really? Did you tell the truth to your mother and Hannah? Jake quickly changed the subject and said something unbelievable. Let's leave that house and live in a new home, just the three of us. I'll cut ties with those who disregard you, Olivia. I'm ready to abandon my mother and Hannah, so please come back. Are you really cutting ties with your mother and Hannah? I was disappointed in Jake and his self-centered actions. So I told him I'm coming back for now, so leave the door unlocked. Jake seemed delayed in responding to my message. A few days later, I returned to my in-laws' house with Megan. Jake, his mother, and Hannah were there, but Frank was nowhere to be seen. I was relieved that Frank didn't have to witness the adults' ugly arguments. When Jake made some remarks, I ignored the displeased pair and took out a divorce form from my bag. I confronted the surprised Jake. I heard you quit your job without telling me. Since we're supposedly managing a business together, does that mean the $5,000 I've been transferring every month was actually your salary? Jake tried to excuse himself. No, that's not it. I told you the business was in trouble, right? So I decided to quit before getting fired. Really? I heard you quit 3 years ago, right? I called your company and it's still not bankrupt. Jake fell silent. I pressed further. By the way, what role do you play in our joint business? Management? Are you the accountant? Jake became increasingly uneasy and started sweating. Jake is supporting the whole family, isn't he, Mother? He quit his job, his side business isn't going well, and yet it's a mystery where the money is coming from. I'm leaving, but please continue to get financial support from Jake. My mother-in-law and Hannah's faces turned pale. But the other day on the phone, you were crying and begging to save only yourself, saying you'd cut ties with your mother and sister. Haha, but that won't happen. I'm also discarding Jake here. What do you mean? I don't understand. Jake hasn't been going to work. That's a lie. He leaves in a suit, and Olivia was supporting the household. It's true. Olivia has been paying for everything for years. I'm unemployed now and not doing any side business. We're going to have a hard life because you kicked Olivia out. We could have had an easy life without working if you hadn't done anything unnecessary. What do you mean by that? You were planning to abandon us, weren't you? Jake's response made my mother-in-law and Hannah furious, and they started arguing. While they caused a commotion, Megan and I began to take action. I came to pick up some forgotten items. I took a cleaning robot bought within the last 5 months, an expensive microwave favored by my mother-in-law, and the beauty device Hannah had gotten from Jake. Wait, that's mine. This is mine since I bought it with my money, or you can pay me back for it. Hannah fell silent at my words. Then I searched for and gathered my belongings from their rooms. The items they had put out did not include my expensive brand bags and accessories. Why are you taking that too? This is mine. I ignored their complaints and sweet talk. Finally, I dropped a bombshell on Jake. Oh, I forgot. I plan to claim compensation from your mistress, Lauren. Tell her it's no use running away. What? How do you know about her? I know you went to Faye with Lauren recently. Good for you, right? Of course, I have all the evidence of the affair, so no escaping that. No way. You've been deceiving me and having fun for the past 3 years. I'll be claiming compensation for the affair, child support for Megan, and oh, you were secretly paying Hannah's compensation too. I'll be claiming that back as well. As I prepared to leave, my mother-in-law and Hannah desperately tried to stop me. I was wrong, Olivia. I'm sorry. We just believed what Jake said. We can't live without you. We'll do anything. Please help us. I can't pay you back for the compensation. I'm sorry too. I apologize for everything. You'll forgive us, right? I couldn't help but laugh at their foolish faces. They finally realized who had been supporting their lifestyle, realizing too late that their non-blood related support was gone. Let's just ignore these people, Mom. Let's go home. Yes, that's right. Jake, you'll be hearing from the lawyer soon. Please take care of it. Leaving a dejected Jake behind, we returned home with the items we had collected. Later, my divorce with Jake was finalized, and I demanded compensation through a lawyer. I received many apologies and pleas for reconciliation from my mother-in-law and Hannah, but I ignored them all. Surprisingly, there was still some inheritance left from Jake's father. The fact that they had been living off my money without using their own made me angry again. However, the inheritance wasn't enough for the compensation, and ultimately they had to sell the house to make a lump sum payment. Naturally, this included the compensation I had been paying for Hannah. After selling the house, I don't know what became of Jake's family. I hope Jake can take care of his family, but ultimately he will choose his own path. I'd also claimed compensation from Jake's mistress, which led to an unexpected revelation. Through the lawyer, I informed her that Jake was unemployed and I had been supporting the family. Jake had deceived her, claiming he was an entrepreneur with a successful business. They broke up after an argument. Megan and I moved to an apartment, and I was able to give her the room she had longed for. I don't think my 17 years were wasted, but sometimes I wonder if I should have made a decision when I started being ignored. Now I feel happy that my home is a peaceful place,